The restaurant was quiet, filled with the low hum of distant conversations and the occasional clinking of silverware against plates. April sat at a corner table, absently stirring the remnants of her lukewarm coffee. She should have been at home with her husband and children. But once again, Paul had been called into work. The holiday season had already been disappointing. Thanksgiving had been spent alone with the kids, their father absent due to work emergencies. Now Christmas was shaping up the same way. April had tried to be understanding. After all, Paul worked tirelessly to provide for their family. But that understanding had worn thin over the years, replaced by a deep, aching loneliness. She sighed, rubbing her temples. Her 3 children were staying with her parents for the night, a rare break from the chaos of motherhood. She had planned to spend the evening with Paul, but once again, duty had pulled him away. "Mind if I join you?" April looked up startled. A man stood beside her table. Tall, well-dressed, with dark eyes that held an easy confidence. He smiled warmly, waiting for her response. For a moment, she hesitated. Something about him was different. He wasn't just another stranger making polite conversation. He studied her closely as if he already understood her exhaustion. Her disappointment, she glanced around the restaurant. Empty tables, no one waiting for her. With a small nod, she gestured toward the seat across from her. The man slid into the chair, extending a hand. "Charles." "Charles Marsh." "April," she responded automatically. His smile widened. "You looked like you could use some company." She huffed a quiet laugh, shaking her head. "That obvious, huh?" Charles leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. "You'd be surprised how easy it is to recognize someone who's tired of being taken for granted." Her chest tightened, the words hit too close to home. They talked for nearly an hour. At first it was small talk, weather, holiday plans, harmless chatter. But as the conversation unfolded, April found herself opening up in ways she hadn't expected. She told him about Paul's endless workshops, about how she felt more like a single parent than a wife. Charles listened, really listened. At one point, he shook his head. "A woman like you deserves more than just being an afterthought." "April." A warmth spread through her chest, unfamiliar but not unwelcome. The evening ended with a simple goodbye. But as April walked out of the restaurant, her mind was filled with thoughts of Charles Marsh. A connection begins. A few days later, April found herself at the park waiting. It had started innocently, just a casual conversation in a restaurant. But when Charles had suggested meeting for a walk, she had hesitated. She wasn't the kind of woman who did things like this. She was a mother, a wife. And yet she had said yes. She told herself it was harmless. Just a walk, just conversation. As Charles approached, his easy smile returned, his dark eyes gleaming with familiarity. He reached for her hand, lifting it gently to his lips. "Shall we?" he murmured. April didn't pull away as they walked. Their arms brushed, and an unspoken connection grew between them. He made her laugh, he made her feel seen. Over the next 2 weeks, Charles became a constant in her thoughts. The text started simple check-ins, compliments, little jokes that made her smile, but they quickly shifted into something deeper. One Saturday night, April lounged on the couch, her phone glowing in her palm. A message from Charles. "Charles, hey, gorgeous. What are you up to?" She hesitated before typing back, "April. Watching a movie, Charles." "Let me guess he's working again." Her stomach twisted. "April." "Yeah, as usual." "Charles, and you're handling everything alone." "He doesn't deserve you." Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then another message came through. "Charles, are you sure he's actually at work?" April frowned. "April. What do you mean, Charles?" "If it were me, I'd check." just saying a pit formed in her stomach. The thought had never crossed her mind before. Paul worked long hours, yes, but he had never given her a reason to doubt him, and yet her thumb hovered over the call button. Moments later, she dialed his work number. It rang, no answer. She tried again, nothing. Finally, she called his cell. When Paul picked up, his voice was laced with concern. "April, what's wrong? Are the kids okay?" She swallowed the guilt creeping up her throat. "Everything's fine, I just wanted to hear your voice." Paul let out a breath. "Sorry. I was handling a situation at the platform. My phone was in my locker." They spoke briefly before hanging up, but as she set the phone down, unease settled in her chest. Why had it taken so long to reach him? Had Charles planted a seed of doubt? Or had she always suspected something wasn't right? Hall dragged himself through the airport parking lot, exhaustion pulling at his limbs. Night shifts had consumed his life. But today he was finally free. Free to go home, free to be with his family. But when he stepped inside the house, the silence was deafening. No laughter, no running feet. No April instead. There was a note. "Took the kids to my parents' house for a few days. Needed space." His stomach twisted. They had fought before, but something felt different this time. Paul sighed, rubbing his temples. He had worked so hard to give his family a comfortable life. The house was paid off. The cars were fully owned. The kids had a future secured. And yet it was never enough. Pushing aside his frustration, he grabbed the pile of mail on the counter. Most of it was junk, but then his hand froze over an envelope. Cream-colored gray trim, his name written on the front. His gut clenched, he tore it. Opened his eyes, scanning the words inside his breath. "Caught in loving memory of our former husband and cherished father." Paul Fowler, his name on a funeral announcement. His pulse roared in his ears as he read the names listed below. April Fowler, Charles Marsh, his wife and another man. Shock turned to disbelief, then fury. The world tilted. Paul clenched the paper in his fists. So this was why she had been distant. This was why she had withdrawn. She was already preparing for a life without him. April sat frozen at the kitchen table, her mother's furious words still ringing in her ears. The divorce papers trembled in her hands, the weight of her choices crashing down on her. She had thought she still had time to explain, to beg to fix things. But Paul had already made his decision. The locks were changed. Her children's paternity was being questioned. And the finality of it all suffocated her. June paced across the room, her hands clenched into fists. Jack stood silent, his face hard as stone. "You were so blind, April." June spat, her voice shaking with a mix of disappointment and fury. "You thought you could flirt, sneak around and play with fire without consequences. Paul is not a fool, and now look at what you've done." April's stomach twisted. She wanted to scream. To cry, to deny that she had ever meant to hurt Paul like this. "I didn't cheat, Mom," she whispered. "Not really. I never slept with Charles." June turned on her eyes, blazing. "That doesn't matter. You betrayed your husband. The moment you let another man take his place in your heart, you humiliated him, neglected him, and pushed him away while entertaining someone else. Do you honestly think Paul cares? Whether you physically slept with Charles or not. You destroyed his trust." Jack slammed the folder onto the table, making April flinch. "All has receipts, April screenshots, messages. Photos, and now you're about to lose everything. Because you thought the grass was greener on the other side." April's breath hitched. "No." She choked out, "I can fix this. I just need to talk to him." Jack let out a bitter laugh. "Talk to him, April. Paul doesn't even want to be in the same room as you." She shook her head violently. He hasn't heard my side. I have to try for our kids. If nothing else? June exhaled sharply and crossed her arms. Then you need a plan. Because if you walk into that conversation like this emotional, desperate and unprepared, Paul will shut you out completely. April swallowed hard. What do I do? Jack sighed, rubbing a hand down his face. First, you need to accept that Paul is furious, and rightfully so. Second, you need to understand that no amount of begging or apologizing will undo the damage overnight. This is not about getting back together tomorrow. It's about proving that you regret what you've done and that you're willing to change. You want a chance then. You need to show him that you respect him enough to face the consequences of your actions. April nodded numbly, gripping the divorce papers, as if they might disappear if she held them tight enough. We'll call him tomorrow, June said, her tone softening only slightly. But you need to be prepared for the worst, April. This might be the end. Meanwhile, at Paul's apartment, Paul sat in the dimly lit apartment, staring at the pile of legal documents on his desk. The ache in his chest hadn't dulled, but he refused to let it consume him. His wife, his partner, the mother of his children, had been planning a future with another man. And yet she had the audacity to act like he was the problem. She thought she had options. She thought she could flirt and then retreat when things got messy. Not this time. Paul exhaled slowly and picked up his phone. His lawyer had advised him to be cautious, to keep his emotions in check, but there was something else he needed to do. A meeting had been set for the next day. April wanted to talk. Paul wasn't sure if he even wanted to see her. But he needed to look her in the eyes one last time, to see if she had any real remorse, or if she was only trying to save herself. And if she was lying, if she thought she could manipulate him again. Then tomorrow would be the day he walked away for good. April arrived at the agreed-upon meeting spot, her parents' house, her hands clammy with nerves. Her heart pounded as she watched Paul's car pull up. When he stepped out, the sight of him nearly took her breath away. He looked different, stronger, colder. There was no warmth in his expression, no love in his eyes. Just a man who had been betrayed one too many times. Paul walked up the porch steps. His movements calculated, his face unreadable. April, he said simply, his voice devoid of emotion. She swallowed hard. Paul. Please, He held up a hand, stopping her before she could begin. Don't start with excuses. I'm here to listen. But only if you're honest. No lies, no half-truth. She nodded rapidly, her throat tight. I never slept with him, she blurted out first. Paul let out a humorless chuckle. That's your defense, that you didn't physically cheat. He shook his head. April, you planned a future with another man? While I was breaking my back to give you and our kids a good life. That is betrayal? Tears welled in her eyes. I was lonely, Paul. You were never home. I felt abandoned. Paul's expression didn't waver. And did you ever tell me that? Or did you just decide to replace me with someone who told you what you wanted to hear? She bit her lip, shame washing over her Paul's side. Rubbing his temples. I won't drag this out. I filed for divorce because I refused to stay in a marriage where I am nothing more than a backup plan. I deserve better. April's breath caught Paul. Please don't do this. I love you. I was stupid and selfish, but I love you. I don't want to lose our family. His jaw tightened. Then why did you act like you already had? She had no answer. Silence stretched between them. I want a paternity test for the kids. Paul finally said. April recoiled as if he had slapped her. You really think I would lie about that? His gaze was steel. I don't know what to believe anymore. April. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Paul, they are yours. He exhaled sharply. Then the test will confirm that. She trembled. If it does, what then? Paul's expression remained unreadable. Then we discuss custody. I won't keep our children from you. But our marriage, that's over. April broke then, her sobs racking her body. Paul remained unmoved. He had already grieved their marriage. Now all that was left was to bury it. April sat alone in her childhood bedroom, the weight of the conversation with Paul crushing her chest. The divorce wasn't just a threat anymore. It was happening, and the paternity test. The very idea that Paul doubted their children's parentage made her stomach churn. She had made mistakes. Yes, but she had never crossed that line. Her heart ached as she thought about how far they had fallen. How her actions had completely shattered the trust between them. The house was quiet now. Her parents had retreated to their room after another long lecture about accountability, and her brother Jack had simply shaken his head before heading out for a drive. No one was on her side, and why would they be? April buried her face in her hands, trying to silence the sobs threatening to escape. She had one last chance to prove to Paul that she still cared, that she was willing to take responsibility, but deep down she feared it was too late. A week passed in a haze of anxiety. April barely slept, her thoughts consumed by the upcoming results. Paul had been distant, communicating only through lawyers, and brief texts about the children's well-being. Finally, the day arrived. She met Paul at the clinic, her hands trembling as she took a seat across from him. He looked as composed as ever, calm, collected, completely in control. The doctor entered the room holding an envelope. The results are in, the doctor said. Mr. Carter, you are the biological father of both children. April let out a shaky breath of relief, but Paul's expression remained unchanged. He simply nodded. Thank you, doctor. Once they stepped outside, April turned to him, desperate for some kind of reaction. Paul, I told you I needed to be sure, he said firmly. Cutting her off, and now I am... She swallowed hard. So what now? Paul exhaled, looking out into the parking lot before meeting her gaze. Now we move forward, but not together. Her heart clenched. Paul, please, I know I hurt you, but I love you. I was lost, and I made terrible choices. But I never wanted to lose you. He shook his head. April, love isn't just about words. It's about actions, and your actions showed me that I wasn't enough for you. Tears welled in her eyes. That's not true. Paul's face remained unreadable. Then why did you turn to Charles instead of talking to me? She opened her mouth, but no words came. He said, I'm not going to keep our kids from you. We'll share custody, and I'll always respect you as their mother. But as for us, that chapter is over. April's shoulders sagged. You really won't give me another chance? Paul hesitated for only a moment before shaking his head. No, April. I can't, and with that, he walked away. April watched him go. The reality settling in, she had lost him not because of one mistake, but because of a pattern of choices she could never take back. And now all she could do was pick up the pieces of her life and try to become someone better, for herself, for her children, and maybe one day for the chance to love again.